wine. So
you're making your own fine vintage, huh?
if people want to come by old Kaczynski's place, I got a whole bunch of Merlot that's been stewing around in my butt sink.
That's what you call it. A toilet is now called a butt sink from here on out.
No one will come and hang out with me.
So Kaczynski just got nicknamed the Unabomber, the Universities and Airlines Bomber. Because where was the first university bomber?
The first one was at Santa Barbara, I believe.
And then
Santa
American
Barbara's
Airlines.
beautiful this time of year, too. It's so nice up there.
Hell, Henry, you can just hop in a car and head on up there.
I could, couldn't I? Or a trolley. Or a bus. Oh, man, California's beautiful.
Stay right where you are so you have an alibi for this evening. I think you're dangerous when you're isolated and lonely in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at a video view right now, and I can see the sun shining in through the window, and even the sun is depressing in Los Angeles.
You know why? Because it doesn't fucking stop.
It works
like God is always looking for your secrets. The sun gets in your crevices.
Well, what happens in the dark of New York will be shown in the lights of L.A.
I will have my revenge!
Yes, you will. All right, let's get Unabomber.
Unabomber. So, when we left off, Ted Kaczynski, he had just made the headlines for the very first time by bombing American Airlines Flight 444. Was not done with the airline industry just yet. He's one thing that we'll start seeing now that he's starting to, get into his groove. There are going to be very long stretches in between attacks with Ted Kaczynski. There's going to be stretches.
Apparently, he was taking a lot of downtime to work on his ribbon dancing for the Olympics.
I heard that.
When he was working on his ribbon dancing technique, again, he went to the qualifying rounds to one of the specific breaks, and he didn't get it because he smelled like dog shit, and they said that would ruin the Olympic Village. And again, another reason Ted Kaczynski was looking for revenge.
Is it true that he shoved the ribbon up his own butthole and tried to lit it on fire, and lit it on fire, and then he called himself the first human bomb?
Yeah, yes. He also went by the this big stinky yo-yo.
Well, he was not done with the airlines. 2 years later, after American Airlines 444, in June of 1980, he sent a letter in a book to the president of United Airlines, Mr. Percy Wood, and the note that he sent along with it, he said, "Dear Mr. Wood, I am sending copies of Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson to a number
sounds like a Wayans Brothers snow comedy.
to a number of prominent people in the Chicago area because I believe this book should be read by all who make important decisions affecting the public welfare."
So he's just an uncle. He's just a bad uncle, but he has no nephews or nieces to spread out his cool books that he thinks will educate them.
He's a smelly Oprah.
A smelly Oprah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
So what actually was inside the book was a ingenious little bomb. When you opened up the book exploded. Tiny metal and wooden fragments exploded in this guy's face. He had damage to his hands, his face, in his thigh. There was a huge chunk of metal lodged right in there.
This reminds me of those talking cards that Hallmark sells now. When you open it and it's like over the hill and it's like a big fat chick on a beach, and then it just, you open it up and she's like, "Happy birthday, you old bitch, you old bastard, your balls are all wrinkly and strange. Happy birthday, yeah."
It's my birthday. What's wrong with these cards?
So he was just experimenting with that, but his birthday gift was a bomb.
A big bomb.
But technically a lot of these bombs that Ted Kaczynski set out just kind of sound like Looney Tunes pranks.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be a lot of Looney Tunes pranks coming up here pretty soon. He was definitely a prankster. Well, this is the point when Postal Inspector Tony Muljot...
Bad name.
So, I think I want to go into medicine. What's your last name? Mulgot? You're going to be more postal.
You're a mailman. That's a mailman's name.
And interesting fact about Tony Muljot, there was a biopic made of him for the USA Network in 1996 in which Muljot was portrayed by Dean Stockwell.
Really?
I love Dean Stockwell.
Yes, of Blue Velvet, Quantum Leap, Battlestar Galactica.
There is no
Handsome
doubt.
guy, cool actor.
No doubt in my mind, now knowing that piece of information, 1995 USA Network, the only reason that network stayed on air is because of Lorenzo Lamas. That show is the only show that mattered.
Silk Stocking.
Renegade.
He was tortured into being handsome. We know this story.
Yeah.
So Tony Muljat, he was the one that started putting a lot of the wood clues together. In all of these bombings, there was always wood involved. There was wood pieces. There was a wooden box. In this bombing, the letter was addressed to Mr. Wood. The publisher of the book was Arbor House, whose logo was also a leaf. The phony return address was Ravenswood Street.
Cool.
And so he did have a sense of humor.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it does sound like all like locations from like a Fear Street novel. You know what I mean?
Ravenswood Street.
Ravenswood Street, where the babysitters are terrified.
So this is also when he starts putting his own little signature on all of the bombs. They found 2 initials punched onto the bomb, FC.
Okay.
And they found out later that FC stood for Freedom Club.
It is kind of fun.
But in order for it to be a club, there has to be more than one person in a
This
shack.
is how sad and lonely Ted Kaczynski
Yeah.
was. Even the manifesto is from the point of view of a group. He had
Right.
to make up his own. He said he wanted to be a hermit, but no, he wanted friends.
Yeah.
He wanted to have like a Winnie the Pooh type scenario with a bunch of friends,
Right.
and he was Piglet, and he had a funny bouncy tiger friend, and a soft bear friend, and a little boy friend, and he couldn't get it together. And speaking of the wood used in this whole process, like once Muljat, once he figured out like the wood being used, where they started like kind of like pinging out like, well, one thing that we now know about him is that he is a woodworker. Like he obviously has got some kind of woodworking skill, and apparently a lot of it was honed because he had a pen pal in Mexico. Did you read about this?
No.
Where he had a friend in Mexico that he would write in Mexico to this farmer that he somehow knew. That he was just like, in perfect Spanish, was just like, and one day we will overtopple our governments, and the mountains will be free, and the cactus will be free. And and the Mexican guy's like, who is sending me letter? Why is he sending me letter? But so what Ted Kaczynski got known for is these wooden cylinders that all the bombs were put inside of, right? Because he also made one for his own fucking mother, which is a bad present for your mother.
I mean, it's nice to get her something, though.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
He severed ties quickly after. But he sent him a wood tube that just said Montanari sempre libere, which meant mountain men are always free.
That's kind of fun. It's a fun
Kind of
message
nerdy and
to...
stupid.
Oh, yeah. Mountain men are always free. I agree with him.
So 1980 comes around after the president of, and that's what's amazing, he got to the president of United Airlines.
Right.
That's how far this guy could reach. So they,
This is obviously before any major terrorist activities occurred on a plane, right? This is even before like locker beam and all that stuff. I feel like everyone was just kind of taking it easy, living that Hawaiian life, running airlines and stuff.
America was really easy in the 1970s.
Yeah, you should-
Nothing was going on. It wasn't like there were roving gangs and gas shortages. Jimmy Carter being a fucking flip-flopper.
Yeah, but even despite all that, the airlines were just like, oh, everything's just fine here. Dare I say hunky-dory.
Well, I remember when you could be able to like walk your grandmother onto the plane and then walk into the cockpit and shake pilots' hands, and then sometimes they'll let you fly. I remember when I was a kid, you just go in the cockpit and the pilot, he kind of smelled like booze. But he was like, "Hey, pop up on my lap," and I popped up on his lap. And then what he did, he put his arms around my lower waist like it was a seatbelt, and he's like, "You take the control. You take the damn control."
You were molested.
I flew the plane for 45 minutes.
Really?
And I was like, "This is you just can't do it anymore in this post 9/11 world." You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, did you fit in the cockpit comfortably, or did you find it to be a tight squeeze, or?
It had like a smoking chair, and there was a game. They had been playing Monopoly for hours, and there was just some asleep woman in a lawn chair in there.
Interesting.
Very different times back then.
Yeah. I think you just kind of screwed a wheel to the wall in your bedroom.
Yes.
And you just gotta turn that a little. Yeah,
And I walked in one of my father's stag parties for the police station.
yeah. That's fun though.
So in 1980, the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit comes on board. And this is still, the Behavioral Sciences Unit was still fairly new at this time, but these people were extremely good at what they did. There are a ton of great books. There's Manhunter, there's Between Good and Evil. Read up on the Behavioral Sciences Unit. But they put forth a profile on this guy, and this is very early on. They've only got a few bombings so far, but their initial profile fucking nails Kaczynski.
They got it, huh?
They said he was an above average, he had above average intelligence, he had connections to academia, that he was kind of a neo-Luddite, where he just hated technology, and they had this guy absolutely nailed, but 3 years later...
I was watching this doc, and one of the FBI analysts literally was just like, and as soon as we saw the first bomb, we knew, like, we had a nerd in our hands. It was just like amazing. I was like, yeah!
Sounds like an OK Cupid situation. They just described the man that they loved, and they found him.
Yeah, but they were describing Paul Bunyan, but what they got was a Teddy fucking Kaczynski.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone wants their nerd to still look like a jock.
Yeah.
That's most important.
Yeah, at the end of the day.
So this goes on for a couple years, and the BSU, they have their profile. This is what they're working with. This is who they're looking for. But other factions in the FBI decided that this was a dead end. This wasn't the guy they were looking for. They were looking instead for a blue-collar airplane mechanic.
Right. And what was the motive? What was the reason for that? So they were thinking workplace violence?
They were thinking that, it's that he hated airlines, but he also hated universities for some reason.
Right. I'll tell you one thing.
He was afraid of planes, and he couldn't read.
So this is also when they put forth in 1983, they set up a 1-800 hotline for the Unabomb Task Force, and they also put out a $1 million reward for anybody who happens to have any information leading to the arrest of the Unabomber.
I like the idea of somebody calling up the 1-800 hotline, but they forgot to hit the 9 instead of the 8. They were looking for a porno thing. And it's like, what am I wearing? Yeah, hood, I love that hoodie.
Yeah, aviator glasses,
you got a beard, you smell bad. Keep on going.
Or I also
are you jacking off right now, sir?
This is also a really good new way for jocks to get at nerds, is to call them up to the Unabomber hotline and have the police come and pick them up in the middle of school. They'll probably pee their pants and everybody will laugh.
Yeah, and then they'll smell like human feces and everyone will know it's them.
So the next bomb is mailed. He gets back to professors. He mails it to Professor Patrick Fisher at Vanderbilt. And this is just extraordinary bad luck that this bomb went off at this certain place, because the teacher that was supposed to go to, the professor he was supposed to go to, he was in Puerto Rico at the time.
The teacher was in Puerto Rico.
Fisher was in Puerto Rico, so his secretary was in charge of opening all of the mail, and
a woman doing all the work again.
So the bomb explodes. It injures her face. It injures her arms. But here's what the bad luck was all about: is that the bomb had been mailed using canceled and insufficient postage. It never should have got there in the first place. But apparently the post guy felt like doing somebody a solid that day, or they just didn't check.
And that was literally the last time a mailman has ever done a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel bad for mailmen, That's what
I don't feel bad for mailmen. They're all part of their own society.
Everyone's part of their own society, Henry. What does that mean?
Yeah, comedians are loners. They're wolves put out in the world. Like
you're in a sketch group
ghosts.
With 9 people.
Yes.
So this poor secretary, this post office guy did a good job, a good thing, and
well, a secretary's first job is to possibly die for her boss.
Yeah,
it's secretary's half bodyguard.
It wasn't even supposed to go to this guy. Kaczynski didn't intend for it to go to this guy. He intended for the package to be returned to the fake address because of the insufficient postage. That was supposed to go to electrical engineering professor Leroy Wood Burnson of Brigham Young.
Another Wood.
So this Mormon.
Yeah, no doubt about
Brigham
it.
Young, yeah.
So he was trying to get goofy with it? He was just trying to have fun?
He was doing a hook shot.
Yeah, it sounds like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar move here.
Yeah.
Revolutionary.
He was pulling a Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah.
So a couple months later, he goes back to Berkeley, and engineering professor Diogenes Angelakos.
Now, this guy literally had stuffed grape leaves for feet. He was so Greek.
This is when Kaczynski, not all of his bombs were mail bombs.
This was
Some
like
of
a
them were
feta
just
cheese bomb or
planned.
something like that?
Some of them were Jaeger bombs.
Ooh, that's very popular, though. He was 20 years ahead of his time.
So some of these he just planted in these universities, which meant he did travel a fair amount.
So Kaczynski dropped this one off himself? He didn't rely on the Postal Service?
No, he didn't do this via. The next couple of them are both ones that he delivered himself. He delivered this one to the Mathematics and Computer Science Personnel Office.
Do you think that's because he was so upset they blooped on the last time he tried to get fun with the Postal Service? He's like, I'll just do it myself then.
Yeah.
I think that's also like there's a certain point because part of the way they break down this type of killers, like they talk about like bomber killers, is that they're very detached and they like to like stand behind and watch the chaos happen.
Right.
And like in his case, he was a missionary killer. So he was doing it for a purpose. But I imagine there's a point where he's like, because we see this all the time. His confidence is ramping up. He's starting to believe that he can control what other people do around him. So I'm certain he wants to now get in the mix a little bit and drop it off. So maybe like not that they'll see you, but so he can watch them pick up the box and it'll get his stinky little boner hard.
Well, he's a celebrity. He wants to walk the red carpet. He's got a big movie premiere coming out, But what's the news media like at this point? The news media all over him? Are they covering it?
No, the whole, the airlines thing, that was a big deal when it
This
happened.
is before Twitter and...
Yeah, of course. So, it's when a bombing would happen and it came out that it was the Unabomber, then they definitely said, like, Unabomber strikes again.
I see.
But, it's not 24 hours, not a 24/7 news cycle.
So it wasn't on par with, like, Richard Ramirez or...
No.
There wasn't Son of Sam?
No.
There wasn't that chilling effect yet on society?
But the manhunt was constantly building.
Yeah.
The more that these popped up, because then it became the biggest manhunt known to man.
So he leaves this strange apparatus in the faculty lounge at Berkeley in the electrical engineering department. It said that it had like a handsaw grip on it, and it was a weird, oddly shaped metal container. So this professor, he just walks over and picks it up.
But as you reread him at first, because I remember in high school, I was just like, fucking CIA's they got us by their puppet strings, man. And I'm still halfway there. But
You were
now
like, so you were like a nerd macho man Randy Savage in high school? I think in high school you were like, yeah, I think I'm CIA.
snap into an apple juice. I was reading now about Lee Harvey Oswald. And so first, when I remember first reading about him, like, oh, he's this sort of pitiful idiot that got pulled in too deep to all these machinations of the CIA. And then you really read the details of Lee Harvey Oswald's life, and he was an incredibly violent man and a terror to his family from when he was a little kid to an adult.
Yeah.
Put simply, he was a pathetic, entitled, self-centered, contrarian jackass with a persecution complex and delusions of grandeur that led him down a road of crime that eventually ended in murder.
Are we talking about Bono? Or...
Now, our main source for the Lee Harvey Oswald section of the story is Case Closed by Gerald Posner, who is coincidentally the same dude who wrote the main source we used for our Mengele series. Fantastic writer, great researcher.
And this is like our legit good boy source.
Yes.
Like Case Closed this is the one that's like, yes, it has all the facts and all the correct timelines. I get it. It's the no fun book that we will come to and we will try to parse out the truth. Later on, though.
It's not
when we get to,
no fun. I find it amazingly interesting and fun.
No, I do too. I because we're shh, Marcus, we're nerds. But
yeah, don't tell anyone.
It's not until we get to my boy Jack Ruby, when things start getting really complicated. We start reading some books that they took out of print.
I feel horrible for this guy. Posner is his name?
Gerald Posner, yeah.
Gerald Posner, he wrote the book, and he's like, case closed. Now, with this, everyone will know the truth. And then all of a sudden, someone's like, I heard Ben Kissel said it was suicide. It's like, okay, well, I guess the case has been reopened.
Damn it. has spent years telling everyone that he was just about to get a raise as president. He never would have committed suicide. But it is really sad. The opening chapter to the newly revamped, like he did a re-release of Case Closed, and the whole beginning prologue is him just being like, "This case has ruined my life. People have hunted me at my home. People have surrounded my family at the mall, yelling, 'You don't know the truth! You don't know the truth!'" And it's like, man, it was fucking 60 years ago.
Yeah, my God. But, that is an interesting point, though. That is how powerful this is.
Yeah.
60 years ago, when the emotions are still so fresh and people are still so passionate about it, there's really nothing in history where people will still start screaming after 4 Coors at a bar about JFK as if it was 1970.
I'm gonna put the Holocaust up there. That's a big one, and that one time that the wide receiver from the Giants caught the ball on his helmet. Those are 2 big parts of history that people are very emotional about.
Absolutely.
Now, admittedly, there are a few inaccuracies in Posner's book, but those inaccuracies are the sorts of mistakes made in any historical account, as I have yet to read a history book that doesn't get at least a few details wrong. Like the books that we read on the Donner Party, on Bonnie and Clyde, on Jonestown, on Rasputin. All of them have contradictions, and all of them have little mistakes because it's impossible to get everything right. And also, we don't know exactly what happened in every single fucking situation.
I don't even know if there is objective reality, Marcus. Let's start there. Let's start there.
But when it comes to something as contentious as the JFK assassination, some people use small mistakes to either discredit the entire thesis or use those mistakes to claim further conspiracy with the powers that be, particularly the CIA. Misinformation versus disinformation. And that's one of the interesting things about the JFK assassination. Having the opinion that there was not a gigantic conspiracy within the government to murder the president is actually somewhat taboo. But I think this de facto assumption hides something important, and it's something that the CIA wants hidden. You see, the CIA likes the world to think that they are an omniscient, lethally clever, all-encompassing, infallible beast with tentacles that can and do reach and control every corner of this earth.
Well, because it benefits them and us in a way, right? Even though I do not agree with the CIA, them having a position of untold mysterious power sort of works from their perspective as a way to deter people working against America, right? Thinking that, we can't go against the CIA. They'll kill their own fucking president to change shit. And it's like, I just looked up, I just typed in the words, "What are the CIA doing right now?" into Google. And they started an Instagram, but they are killing a bunch of people in Afghanistan, apparently.
Oh, of course.
But the so-called deep state did not exist in the 60s any more than it exists today. Although it is interesting that many people who argue for the deep state's involvement in the Kennedy assassination will completely dismiss the claim that it still exists as ridiculous. Now, I do believe that there was a CIA cover-up when it comes to Lee Harvey Oswald, but I don't think that it was a cover-up to hide their involvement. Rather, it was a cover-up to hide their lack of involvement.
Fucking eat that, you pieces of shit. Think about that. Roll that around your fucking head for a second. Live Marcus's life. His whole life of doubt. His life of shadows and mysteries and yelling at his poor wife.
How many, obviously, in-depth research, there's been a lot of work done on this episode, and this series will definitely entail a lot of detail. How many pickles did you eat during the research process? I mean, I just want the audience to get a sense of how deep we're about to go. Are we talking 3 jars of pickles, or are we talking 6 Vlasics?
I'm going to say 4 cheeseburgers.
Holy crap. You ate
You only
meat?
eat I thought you and Carolina share a cheeseburger a day.
No. I actually am not as unhealthy as you people think I am. I'm fine.
You people?
Okay.
You people.
Wow.
I ate a fair amount of hobnobs, all right?
You don't got to tell me.
Just like, it's just something about how, like, if we had been doing this series like 10 years ago, it would have been you fucking sucking down whiskey, like same thing the way we used to read, just like chain smoking cigarettes, like reading microfiche, and like now it's you on a standing desk eating hobnobs, but typing with the wrist guards.
Oh,
I have to start using wrist guards.
Yeah, well, I have to protect myself from carpal tunnel. It's
of
starting
course.
to set in.
Absolutely.
Well, over the years, the CIA and the FBI have wasted a bevy of resources on harassing and monitoring people who weren't dangerous. Peaceful agitators like Martin Luther King or harmless intellectuals who just had some curiosity towards communism at one point in their life. Meanwhile, people like Timothy McVeigh and his entire network of white supremacists, the 9/11 hijackers, and of course, Lee Harvey Oswald, end up slipping through the cracks and therefore are able to change the course of American history. See, the American intelligence community, just like every other organization, is staffed by regular people. And regular people fuck up and make bad decisions every second of every day.
No, Marcus, it's the Central Intelligence Agency. Are you not understanding the acronym? They're brilliant minds. No way could they fail.
But if the all-powerful CIA is shown to sometimes be incompetent and fallible when it comes to saving American lives, then they lose what makes them powerful in the first place, the belief that they are capable of anything.
I think it does pop a lot of people's balloons, though, right? Where the concept of the CIA, you shine a light into it, where it's just an office where people work, and they are government workers. They are cops, technically, and spies, and they do work for the U.S. government, but they are not the shadowy world that used to be. It's not like the kind of untold power they had during the OSS days, during the fucking Bush, the old baddies, the old dudes, and how they did have more involvement centrally in our government. And so it's hard because people want that villain. They want it so much. It's nice to have. It's almost comforting to think that there is this capable organization that is both we can never understand, because again, it's a sign that things are under control and not total chaos.
Well, the way Gerald Posner put it is when you put the weight of JFK versus the weight of Lee Harvey Oswald, just two men, you put them against each other as just two men, the scales don't balance.
Right.
Life is not fair. Life is just, it's one of those where it shows that the little dweeb can take out the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, though, for every one person that slips through the CIA's net, 1,000 are stopped. I mean, there's a reason why we haven't had a major international terrorist attack in almost 20 years. But infallible, the CIA is not. However, that's not to say that the CIA and many other organizations didn't want John F. Kennedy dead. The CIA itself, the military-industrial complex, right-wing extremists, left-wing extremists, the mob, and even his own vice president, Lyndon Johnson, all had reasons to rejoice in JFK's death.
This is why JFK needed to bring everyone together and just say the sentence, I know I've angered a lot of you, and just try to bring them in. He just needed one trip to Margaritaville, and all of this could have been done and
So you
saved.
think JFK should do a Ben Kissel HR trip?
Yes.
Where he just is like, let's get all the apologies done in one evening. But for somebody that was banging all of these actresses that he was, I mean, I guess that was a part of it. He straight up had so many enemies.
So many.
And then when he went into Dallas, he went into one of the most dangerous places in the world for him. It's amazing. He had all of these forces trying to kill him, and the one that got through, or at least partially got through, was this little nothing dweeb.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll get into it, but it would have been a good day to have a roof on the car, but I'm sure we'll discuss it.
Well, we absolutely will. Now, if I could compare Lee Harvey Oswald to anyone in history, I'd compare him to someone like Rasputin.
Really?
Yeah. As we said in the series about Rasputin, he began his life as a simple Russian peasant, but eventually rose to such a level of power and influence in the Tsar's court that the world would be an entirely different place had he never existed. Lee Harvey Oswald is much the same type of figure. Of course, not a power broker and not in a position of influence, but the fate of the entire world hinges on November 22nd, 1963, in ways we can't even imagine.
Also, there's no way he had a ding-dong Mutants. It would have thrown off his. He wouldn't have been able to aim. It would have thrown off his entire gravitational structure. There's no way he could have done it with a ding dong the size of Rasputin's.
No, he had a tinier penis, so it got harder.
Yeah.
That's true for tinier penises. They get harder than big penises.
I've seen different cockuments, and big ones get just fine, just hard, just fine. So whatever.
It takes them a while, though.
Well, had Kennedy not been killed that day, the world would be a fantastically different place. At the very least, Kennedy surviving that day in Dallas means no escalation in Vietnam and no Watergate. And without these two massive fuck-ups, American politics would be a much different scene than what we're putting up with today.
He was at least planning to roll back out of Vietnam. That was one of his main tenets, I believe, that he was going to try and get us out of there, which would have changed everything. And no Watergate, no Forrest Gump.
Yep, and of course that hotel wouldn't have all the cool, like, punny things about Richard Nixon whenever you go to the Watergate Hotel, which is awesome in Washington, D.C., by the way. They've always been very good to us. But I also have the inverse. Do we get the 65 Civil Rights Act? Do we get the Voting Rights Act? Do we get those progressive legislations that Kennedy had pushed forward without his death? Because that was sort of the consolation. Prize for LBJ.
I would argue that the anger and betrayal felt over the Vietnam War and Watergate, it just disappears. And maybe, just maybe, the country focuses more on civil rights because we're not pissed off about everything else. The country is much more united. It's nowhere near as divided. And perhaps more things get done, and we would be in a better place now than we are today.
Well, we definitely have a lot better chiropractors because the back on JFK was so horrible, he would have perfected it.
I also wonder if this was a massive lesson to the United States of America that taught us that negative chaos allows for the government to actually obtain a lot more control. That when you throw everybody in a tizzy and everybody's just, I mean, when you're so mad at the president, I don't want to bring this to Dune. But the part of God Emperor of Dune, the whole thing is that you got to create a villain in order to create peace, right? You create a localized, everybody hates this person, so you create this kind of static order around everybody else because you're directing their fury up to the top. Where Nixon helped do that, right? Where it helped create this kind of divide between the people and the state, but they also use that too. It's all fucked up.
I cannot believe you brought Dune into this.
I
honestly,
will
it
get
reminds
to it. I'm
me-
in book
now-
5. I'm almost done.
Now I have to bring up the thing that I always bring up, which is the Big Lebowski, where it's just like where Jeffrey Lebowski's just looking at Walter and just be like, "What does this have to do with Vietnam, Walter? What does it have to do with Vietnam?"
Big Lebowski doesn't exist. That character doesn't exist. That's the thing, man. Art is different. Movies are different. Music in particular.
CCR?
With CCR? Well, I mean, yeah, they're still around, but you don't have Fortunate Son. I mean, that's the thing. Without the anger of the Vietnam War, you don't have the Stooges. You don't have Suicide. You don't have fucking punk. There's so much that happens because of these events. And there's so many ripples that happen from November 22nd, 1963, that it actually kind of makes Lee Harvey Oswald one of the most consequential figures in American history.
I want us to continue, and I'm sorry, but I do just have to. I'm gonna put my weird cap on. Was Vietnam worth it for CCR? The band, some of the greatest protest, Neil Young, some of the greatest protest music of all time. The Iraq War, we had horrible songs. I mean, that was awful.
Horrible song.
Again, bad Neil Young songs.
Yeah, exactly. But Vietnam, man.
Rockin' in the Free World's a great song.
Yeah.
Would you give up Apocalypse Now? I mean, you name it.
It is my favorite movie.
You just sound like the man that created the pet rock arguing for Vietnam.
No, I'm not saying we would be in a utopian society, nor am I arguing that John F. Kennedy was some sort of saint or some sort of savior, because we'll get into his many failings and the possibility of him even losing the 1964 election because of the CIA in Episode 3. But the fact remains that because of Lee Harvey Oswald, the world changed.
and the story of how Oswald came to be in the sniper's nest that day is absolutely fucking fascinating.
Awesome.
So, without further ado, let's start our series on JFK by getting into the life story of one of the most pivotal and pitiful figures in American history, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oswald!
Lee Harvey Oswald was born in New Orleans in 1939 to a single mother. Single because Lee's father died of a heart attack 2 months before Lee was born. And naturally, this did not have a positive effect on his mother, Marguerite. See, even though conspiracy authors try to paint Marguerite as a loving, positive character, her other sons, besides Lee, paint a much different picture of the woman who raised the most infamous assassin of the 20th century. Lee's brother Robert described Marguerite as a domineering, controlling woman, high-strung and unable to accept the fact that her husband was dead.
So scary coming home from school, seeing a bunch of your dad's old clothes on a broom, her just saying, see, he's still alive, see.
Now, grief is understandable, but Marguerite completely abandoned her children and sent 2 of her sons to an orphanage following her husband's death, while the infant Lee was passed between her sister, housekeepers, and babysitters. That was until the age of 3. By then, Lee was old enough to be shoved off to an orphanage as well. And he spent another year away from his mother before she pulled all the boys out of the orphanage in 1944 and moved them from New Orleans to Dallas.
Okay.
It sounded like Marguerite was a very classic narcissist.
Yeah.
Where she was so wrapped up in her own grief and her own story, because as she will upload her feelings of insecurity and / superiority to Lee as he grows up, where she believed that she was supposed to be some other character in another important chapter of the world. Like she thought that she was this special lady, and now she's like stuck in this thing, and this narrative of being poor with all these kids didn't fit with the way she viewed her life, so she just got rid of the kids.
Sounds like a family structure that it's similar to a vodka Red Bull. You've got your insecurity mixed right there with all the security in the world.
Hey kids, you ever been raised by a vodka Red Bull? I tell you what, I'm great for 15 minutes, but then I am vomiting.
Well, in Dallas, Marguerite married a man named Edwin Ekdahl, and because his work required a lot of relocation, Oswald lived in 13 different places before he was 10 years old, which would have been okay if he'd had the support of at least one parent. But Marguerite and Ekdahl fought constantly, and Marguerite, by all accounts, was a selfish, entitled person who never took responsibility for anything. And when Ekdahl left, Lee replaced him as Marguerite's companion, and Lee became Mother's special little boy.
I'm Mother's special little boy. I'm just so special. Mom knows. Mom knows. I get that milk. I get that milk as soon as it's made. I get that milk as soon as it hits that nipple. Oh, I gotta get that milk. I'm punching that belly button.
Hey,
I told that to my mother.
Hey, Lee, how old are you now? You're still breastfeeding?
I'm 7 years old.
You're 7. Okay.
No, I think he breastfed normal.
Probably. Well, see,
I mean, he didn't do it standing on his hands.
That would be so
he's
much
still
fun.
a person.
That'd be funny too. But Kissel breastfed till he was like 14.
I breast 8. No, that's disgusting. No, I did. Whatever. I was very close to my mother as a child. I didn't talk a lot. Would you stop?
You treated her like a hamster water bottle until you had chest hair.
See, Marguerite couldn't keep friends because she always found an excuse for a disagreement. She was a pain in the ass. Neighbors hated her because she was constantly starting fights, and she constantly complained about how the unfairness of life had cheated her out of something better. Nothing was her fault. It was all life's fault.
So she's one of those women where one of the first sentences out of her mouth is, I don't like drama. I don't like drama. Drama likes me. It's like, okay.
I'm just one of those people. I avoid drama. Like, I'm not into drama. Don't bring your drama to me. But I tell you what, Bridget is a bitch and she should be fired.
Well, this entitlement was passed on to Lee. as Marguerite consistently told him that he was better and brighter than all the other kids while providing him with zero education or guidance on how to actually achieve and earn that distinction.
During one of my mom's crisis periods when I was younger, at one point, I do mean this, she did seat me in the car and she said, Henry Thomas, you have psychic powers. I spoke with a psychic who said in a previous life you were an alchemist, and you need to make sure to use your powers for good and not for evil. And I just remember being 10, just going, nice.
Nice, yeah. I have a psychic power, but we're going to go to In-N-Out Burgers now, Mom. Sweet.
Yeah, I bet it, Mommy. I bet it. I'm going to start hitting Daddy, and I'm going to grab the wheel of the car while we're driving, Mommy.
Well, because of this, Lee grew up sullen, angry, and violent.
Why was he so angry? His mom loved him. I mean, this doesn't sound like... It sounds like a doting mother, but...
No, his mom did not love him. His mom
She
was
did.
trying to use him as an extension of herself.
I see.
Like,
Okay.
he wasn't actually a person to her. Like, she was just an extension of her own ego.
Okay, I see. So not so much a mama's boy who got everything from his mother, more like used as an... I see.
Kind of, I mean, he was extremely spoiled, but that's not good for a kid.
Right, okay.
Well, one neighbor named Hiram Conway, who lived 2 doors down from Lee for 3.5 years, said Oswald was an almost vicious child who would throw rocks at all the other kids just for the fun of it, just to see him get hurt. Why are you making that face like you did that all the time, Ben?
I mean, who were the kids? We don't, because kids are very mean.
Because you're a fucking goon. You're a born goon.
No,
and
I
you
was the
throw
one who got bullied.
boulders at people.
No, I did not throw boulders at people. No, I'm just saying.
You're like Donkey Kong. You're throwing barrels and ladders at people that are just trying to walk the street. And yeah, you're larger and you do get more attention, but that's why you technically should be giving gifts. You should be wearing one of those like Nordic shirts, like the old style Santa Claus.
If you were my size, you would have been in prison 20 years ago. The ideas that you have of the freedoms of a large man are insane.
Well, another neighbor said they saw Lee chasing his half-brother John with a butcher knife. And when Lee couldn't catch him, he threw the knife so hard at his half-brother that it stuck in the wall. Again, you've got a faraway look in your eye.
Because I have a horrible joke. Oh, it hurts. How couldn't he catch his half-brother? You know, because he like doesn't have legs. Henry started this thing with the necktie joke, and then it just... I'm derailing the whole thing. Yes. Sorry.
Well, when the neighbor turned to Marguerite in shock, she dismissed the attempted stabbing as just a little scuffle.
Jeez.
Yeah, you should. They only throw in the knife because I didn't get the harpoon gun in the mail.
Well, even so, when half-brother John moved to New York City and got married in 1950, Marguerite and Lee followed 2 years later and brought their dysfunction into the half-brother's home once more. He didn't want him there.
No, and they didn't ask him either.
Yeah.
They just rolled in with Lee Harvey Oswald, little psychopath, and a mom. Marguerite is just fucking shrieking and crying about how everything's unfair. Very histrionic woman. Just taking over what I imagine is not the hugest place because it's an apartment on the Upper East Side.
Yeah. Well, on one occasion, Marguerite asked Lee to turn down the TV. So Lee pulled out a knife, threatened her, and punched her in the face.
So it looks some kind of remote control, Mommy? Like some kind of remote control, Mommy? I don't think so. Do remote controls have knives?
During later testimony, Marguerite downplayed the incident by saying, a knife wasn't that big.
Well, just it's. I guess a remote control hadn't come along yet. That could have saved this entire scuffle from happening.
But after that incident, half-brother John reached his limit and made Marguerite and Lee leave. They moved to the Bronx, and even though Lee was enrolled in school, he refused to attend, and Marguerite didn't make him go.
How did they get enough money to keep on moving? I mean, it's not that cheap to uproot yourself all the time. And
I'm not sure. I mean, she was working. I don't exactly know what she did for. Do you know what Marguerite did for a living?
I honestly do not know. I don't know. It didn't say in any of the books that I read. It's just things were really cheap.
Right.
Things were cheaper than they are now in this economy.
That's very true.
So during all of this time, Lee Harvey Oswald was viewed as like, so the mom, so all of this kind of built, I think, to him starting coming at her with the knives. Because the way it started, she doted upon him, right? She said all of this shit about how he was a genius and stuff, but she also told him that he was very physically fragile.
Yeah.
And that you can't go and play sports with the other boys. And he says, like, so what am I supposed to do, mommy? Just like, that's why we're putting you in tap dancing lessons.
Whoa!
So Lee Harvey Oswald took tap dancing lessons, which I can only imagine is just him just going, oh, you want me to do T for 2, huh? Oh, you want to do T for 2? Guess what? I only do T for 1, baby.
If you would have done tap dancing outside of the when he was being arrested, I'm a patsy. Combined with tap dancing, I think you gotta legally let him go.
Well, when Oswald was finally sent to a youth house for refusing to go to school, a psychiatrist with the improbable name of Renatus Hartogs said that Lee had the potential for explosive, aggressive, and assaultive behavior.
Yeah, he's all sorts of fucked up. He is very, very mean. He yelled a lot. He yelled at the nurse. He yelled at me. And I was like, hey, now, let's think about this for a second because I'm a hypnotist.
Which is true. Renatus Hartogs, this is where we're going to do a little bit of... Let's do a sideswipe here. Do you think this is when they started training him for MK Ultra and they started giving him LSD? This is true because so-called Dr. Renatus Hartogs, right? He was a part of he had legit connections to the training facilities of MK Ultra and was one of the proponents of using LSD for mind control operations. And so all of this is very connected together. But for some reason also then, Renatus Hartogs, after all this happened, after Lee Harvey Oswald left his charge, he was fired for having sex with a client where he's a professional hypnotist. This is true. He was a professional hypnotist. And he got fired for having sex with his client because he basically manipulated a schizophrenic woman into believing that the only way to cure her was for her to have sex with him. Professional hypnotist. That's why never be in a room with a professional hypnotist ever.
I agree.
And they tried to say, obviously he ended up got his license removed and all stuff, but they asked him what his defense was, and his defense was, is there crime in seduction?
Well, when you do it like that, surprisingly enough, there is.
Very clear crime.
So, okay, let's we'll put a button on that rabbit hole, but let's just say that indeed something like that, it did happen, and you are trying to recruit people for MK Ultra. What is it about Lee Harvey Oswald that would make him recruitable? He's an asshole. He has knife skills, but they're like, okay, can he tap? Oh, he does know tap? Well, then he's in?
That's incredible. We are going to put him immediately on the CIA summer stock program. Just immediately doing the CIA's version of Oklahoma.
No, they were doing MK Ultra experiments at Harvard. They were doing it on people like Ted Kaczynski. They weren't doing it on truant boys in the Bronx.
Okay.
He's a good human bullet. I mean this. You would say it a lot. Yes, he is loose. He is useless. But maybe he's so useless. He's useful.
Yeah, I don't know, because you don't want... He's so unpredictable, though.
Yep.
You want someone who is
exactly.
predictable.
No. Sometimes, though, you want another that's unpredictable, that can make a bunch of messes, and then a predictable person has to come and deal with. That's the power of being unpredictable.
Sometimes you want to be unpredictably predictable.
That's the thing, is that Lee was by no means untethered from reality. He just thought that reality revolved around Lee. Emotionally isolated and lacking any affection or family stability, Lee developed a vivid fantasy life in which he was a being of omnipotence and power, and the situation was only made worse by his mother. By 1953, Lee had been placed in an institution for disturbed boys and given mandatory psychiatric care, but instead of addressing the problem that her son was an asshole, Marguerite blamed the New York court system for being unfair. And so she took Lee back to New Orleans.
They say that kids have all the power now, but honestly, Lee Harvey Oswald just been like, I ain't going to school. And they're like, they have to be like, all right, so you just like walk down the street with his weird little like 1950s white shirt on with the cigarettes stuck in the sleeve, like kicking mailboxes and stuff, just saying, I ain't going to school.
Now, conspiracy theorists like to either mitigate or outright ignore Lee's vast psychological problems in childhood, saying that the tests on his mental state were inconclusive and that Oswald was nothing more than a tense, if withdrawn, boy.
But records and the accounts of neighbors show that Lee Harvey Oswald's background when it came to his early childhood is far more in line with some of the more dangerous people we've covered on this show, rather than the life of a secret agent. So when the Oswalds returned to New Orleans, Lee was a spoiled, self-centered teenager who would stand at the head of the stairs in his home and scream at his mother to come make him something to eat.
He's Holden McNeely.
Yeah, we were all thinking that, and Holden McNeely.
If
Check
you
him out,
listen
Wizard
to-
of the Bruiser, page 7.
If you listen to stories about Holden's childhood, it sounds like this. He was scary to his parents.
Yes.
And no matter what Marguerite was doing, she stopped everything to take a plate of hot food to Lee's room.
Aw.
But that's not aw. But what kind of childhoods the two of you have?
Honestly, I could have gone for some. You're telling I got room service up in this? Sweet.
I need something to eat, Mommy. I need something to eat. Oh, Henry Thomas, you've already drained me dry this afternoon. I'm not some kind of heifer. I'm not from Nebraska. Hey, Mommy, you're going to have to go out and get me somebody else's milk. Okay, Henry Thomas, let me get my bucket.
Just a tyrant. The tyrant in Queens.
Furthermore, Marguerite had moved her teenage son to a red light district in New Orleans, which meant that Lee was growing up in a community of crime and corruption. Lee also showed a small propensity for animal cruelty. Once, during a fishing trip with a group of neighborhood children, Lee laid all the fish he'd caught that day down on the bank and left them to die rather than throwing back the small ones or even keeping the larger ones to eat later.